Hello and good evening. I am right on time. So tonight, I'm going to actually give this a few minutes so that people can get notified and or come in. I will find my chapters. Fun stuff in store for tonight's video. So I will say hello and good evening. Tonight, we are going to go through a compare-contrast of Matthew 24 and Luke 21. Hi, Roxanne. Nice to see you. For those of you who did not catch the video that I did setting the stage for this, please watch that first. It is linked in the description box of this video. It is pinned in the chat. That is the precursor to this. Essentially, the point of that video was to set the stage and help people understand who may be under the mistaken impression that Luke is a completely chronological book like Matthew, Mark, and John are. And that's simply not the case. That doesn't mean that none of it is chronological. Obviously, it starts with the genealogy of Christ, the birth of Christ, respected to John the Baptist, the beginning of Jesus's ministry, and then the end of it is chronological also. However, what we kind of observe by going through the middle chapters of the book of Luke is that he kind of groups like thoughts together rather than keeping it completely chronological. This was specifically evidenced when comparing the events of the triumphal entry to, actually, just the later middle chapters of the book of Matthew. For instance, Jesus rides into Jerusalem on the donkey. The end of the first 69 weeks of years, kingdom presentation, Matthew 21. The religious leaders rejected the offering of the kingdom. It was immediately delayed to a second coming. Jesus prophesied that and said in Matthew 21, the end of the chapter, did you never read in the scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected, the same is made the head of the corner. It is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore, I say unto you, the kingdom of God shall be taken from you and given to a nation bringing forth the fruits thereof. 2 chapters later, in Matthew 23, he pronounced a whole bunch of woes upon the religious leaders. And the end of that chapter was, you shall not see me henceforth until you shall say, blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Matthew 24 and 25 are the Olivet Discourse. The Last Supper is in Matthew 26. He's crucified in Matthew 27, and he rises again from the grave in Matthew 28. There is a very distinctly chronological sequence of events laid out in Matthew. Mark mirrors that. Luke is different. As an example, in Matthew 23, 2 chapters after the triumphal entry, was when Jesus pronounced woes upon the religious leaders for not knowing the time of his visitation. In Luke 13 is where those woes are pronounced, 6 chapters prior to the triumphal entry. So what you will see is that Luke is not the same chronological nature as the other Gospels. The point of me saying that is to help underscore the fact that the Olivet Discourse, as we would expect to find it in a central location like we do in Matthew and Mark, is not so in Luke. And that was the primary purpose of that video, was to demonstrate that it is contained in chapters that lead up to where you would expect to find it, because where you would expect to find it is talking about something else entirely. By the time that after the time that Israel rejected Jesus at the triumphal entry, there were several things that put into motion. The first was prophesied that the kingdom of God would be taken from Israel, given to a nation bringing forth the fruits thereof. That means that it was immediately delayed to a second coming, and in the interim, Jesus would go to the cross, 4 days later, die for the sins of Israel under the old covenant, permanently shut the old covenant up, and bring in the new covenant, whereby Gentiles were then invited to participate in heavenly promises through faith in Christ. However, immediately when Israel rejected him, blindness was cast over them, which was said to persist until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Paul talked about this in Romans 11. For I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, lest you be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in, and so all Israel shall be saved. Well, the casting of blindness was Luke 19 as a result of them not knowing the time of their visitation. So not only was the kingdom taken off of the table for them at that time and delayed to a second coming, blindness was also cast over Israel, save for a remnant according to the election of grace. Now, what that blindness consists of is specifically what is talked about in Isaiah 29. It's actually talked about in several different places, but this is the meaning of Daniel 12. Seal up the book to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. That is a result of the casting of blindness. Many is a reference in the book of Daniel, and Jesus picks up on this in his Gospels. Many is a reference to Israel. Many running to and fro is specifically what Isaiah 29 says. The vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed. Daniel, to a people appointed to blindness. And yes, I have a point with going through this because it is extraordinarily pertinent to the conversation this evening. So this is Isaiah 29:11. The vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed. Daniel. There are two books. One is specifically referred to as sealed, and one is specifically referred to as unsealed. Revelation is the unsealed book. Seal not the words of this book, very specifically stated in the last chapter of the book. In contrast to Daniel, seal up the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. So there is a very, very heavy importance placed on the information contained in Daniel, and it is sealed, hidden from the people who are pointed to blindness. They're not going to get it. So what is the role of people in the interim who have the Holy Spirit, who are not appointed to blindness? To teach those who are appointed to blindness what they need to look for, what the end times prophecies say is going to happen. Why? Because the vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed, which men deliver to one that is learned, saying, read this, I pray thee. And he saith, I cannot, for it is sealed. And the book is delivered to him that is not learned, saying, read this, I pray thee. And he saith, I am not learned. The whole purpose for us being able to learn, we're not appointed to blindness. We have the Holy Spirit to give us wisdom and knowledge and understanding, is specifically what Paul referenced in Romans 11, to have mercy on the Jews and teach them the things that they could not learn themselves. That is why in Hebrews 10, and which is a Jewish epistle, and in the Gentile epistle, 2 Thessalonians 2, he says, not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, or regarding the gathering together. There is an instruction given to assemble with the Jews for the purpose of learning, teaching, and disseminating the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is why Paul, as a Jew who had a heart for his Jews, for his Jew brethren, used his missionary journeys to the Gentile cities to evangelize in the synagogues, because that is the commission, is to have mercy upon those who are appointed to blindness. The primary purpose of which is to teach out of the sealed book. So having set the stage for this, triumphal entry, make or break day for Israel, the king coming to bring the kingdom. They reject him. They get blinded, except for a remnant according to the election of grace, which obviously Paul was a part of. The rest were blinded. So what would be the merciful thing to do? To teach out of the book they are unable to understand. This was the purpose of the Olivet Discourses. Jesus was having mercy on a people appointed to blindness. This is the reason why understanding the sequence of events from Matthew in a chronological order is so important, because blindness was cast over Israel in Matthew 21, which is sister passage is Luke 19. The Olivet Discourse was given in Matthew 24 regarding a people who would, at the time the events would be pertinent in the future, still be appointed to blindness. Essentially, what you're looking at with regard to the book of Daniel and prophecies pertinent to Israel, to this people appointed to blindness, is part of the 70 weeks. Yes, Daniel 12 also, because that's where it talks about seal up the book to the time of the end, many shall run to and fro, knowledge shall be increased. And Daniel specifically says, I don't understand. He says, how long shall it be? He says, from the abomination that maketh desolate, there shall be a time, times, and in half, until he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, then all these things shall be finished. Okay, so we know from a specific point to the end, there's going to be this amount of time. But the abomination of desolation isn't the beginning, it's in the midst of the week. So obviously there's going to be another event which starts the week. They're kind of going to need to know about that. And then obviously they'll need to know also about the midpoint, because that's kind of the last shot they have to preserve their mortal life. Because if they don't flee, they'll die, which is what Jesus says in Matthew 24. So yes, Daniel 12, we're specifically told it's a sealed book. So you need to tell the people who aren't going to be able to read it what it says, because what other shot would they have? That's why the Great Commission, that's why the command to gather together. The gathering together is the mixed congregation of Jews and Gentiles for the purpose of spreading the gospel. So when you're looking at the linear sequence of events, we take this from Matthew. Most people are familiar with Matthew. If they're going to be familiar with the gospel, they're familiar with Matthew. Matthew 21, triumphal entry. Matthew 24, Olivet Discourse, talking about the second coming, because once they rejected Jesus, the offering of the kingdom was taken off of the table. Did not matter that he was still there bodily. It wasn't coming to them at that time. What it did was it appointed them to blindness, except for that remnant according to the election of grace. It ensured that he would go to the cross 4 days later, and it ensured a second coming, among other things. Obviously, a change in covenants, a change in dispensations. You and I get invited to participate when we would not have otherwise. But where we see this counterpart is in Luke 19 to Matthew 24. The casting of blindness was on that pivot point day, the triumphal entry day in Israel's future, or Israel's history, their make or break day. So when you take this back into Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy, it is entirely relevant. It says, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, Nehemiah 2, unto the Messiah the Prince. Matthew 21, Luke 19, make or break day, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. Talking about Nehemiah 2. So it takes them to their make or break day. It takes them to triumphal entry day. They had two prophecies upon which they should have been able to identify it, which is what Jesus specifically stated in Luke 19. If thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. Why? Because you had two ways you should have known. And obviously, neither one of them did you any good. Zechariah 9, behold, thy king cometh unto thee, lowly and meek, riding the colt full of a donkey. And Daniel 9, unto the Messiah, the Prince, shall be from that point in the past to that day, 7 weeks and 62 weeks. They should have known, and they didn't. So blindness was cast over them. Okay, so that's Palm Sunday, Nisan 10. The Olivet Discourse is technically given 2 days later, because Matthew 26 tells us that after he completed delivering the Olivet Discourse, it was 2 days until the Passover. So the kingdom was taken off of the table, delayed to a second coming on Nisan 10, technically the evening of Nisan 11, whatever. And on Nisan 12, the Olivet Discourse is given, talking about the events of that they're going to be blinded to, that they need someone to teach them about because they're now blinded, except for that remnant according to the election of grace. The rest have been blinded. So they need someone to tell them. That is what Jesus is doing. So the rest of Daniel's 70 weeks, he's got to tell them about, give them starting points, ending points, middle points, all of that, because how else would they know? Because they are blinded. And after 62 weeks, 4 days specifically, shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. Yeah, why? Why the events of 70 AD to destroy their city and their sanctuary? Because they knew not the time of their visitation. Luke 19. If thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto the kingdom, but now they are hid from thine eyes. That's the first thing that happened to them. But what's the second? The specific judgment upon Israel for not knowing the time of the king coming to bring the kingdom on Nisan 10 Palm Sunday. For the days shall come upon thee that an enemy shall cast a trench about thee, encompass thee round, and keep thee on every side, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee. They shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. So yes, you've got a people appointed to blindness because they knew not the time of their visitation, and you've got a judgment that he just prophesied, 70 AD, you're going to lose your temple and your city because you knew not the time of your visitation. And then the last verse of Daniel's prophecy talks about the outstanding week of years in the 70 weeks prophecy. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. That's the beginning point. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate. That's the identification of they have an identification of the beginning. Now they have an identification of the end. And in Daniel 12, he says, how long shall it be till the end? He says, from the abomination that maketh desolate, there shall be 1,260 days. Actually, times it in half. Till he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, then all these things shall be finished. Even until the consummation and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So what you're looking at in the scope of Daniel's prophecy is a sealed book to a people who have just been blinded. So what's Jesus going to do? The most gracious thing he could do, and he's going to tell them in 2 different ways about both parts of that, which are extraordinarily pertinent, that they've now been blinded to, and they need someone to lead them by the hand and give them identification so that they know when judgment is coming upon them. One is in Luke 21, and one is in Matthew 24. Jesus handholds the Jews and tells them specifically what they need to look for, because the information pertaining to the judgments, which is in Daniel, is sealed to a blinded people. It is the most gracious thing that he could do, is tell them, handhold them, and give them every single pertinent sign to look for to save their lives. We're going to start in Luke 21. Actually, we're going to start in Matthew 24. We've already been introduced to, well, like I said, if you watched the previous video, hello to everyone. Hi, Wendy. Hi, Last Days Christians. Nice to see you both. And hello to everyone else who is here. If you watched, hopefully you watched the video that came before this, which was talking about the pieces of the Olivet Discourse that are in Luke leading up to Luke 21. And you find them in Luke 12 and Luke 17. And the whole reasoning for what we find in Luke 21 is found in Luke 19, which I just went through, which is the aftermath of them rejecting the king coming to bring the kingdom, not knowing the time of their visitation, blindness cast, and the events of 70 AD prophesied. You will see the events of 70 AD live and in living color in in Luke 21, 2 chapters later. But what you see in parallel, Luke 19 prophesied the destruction of 70 AD. It's actually where Matthew 24 picks up. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple. His disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, see ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. There is minute, and when I say minute, I mean minute similarity between Matthew 24 and Luke 21. That is one of the pieces that have similarity, is the events of 70 AD referenced in both. However, the events of 70 AD referenced in Matthew 24 are literally limited to verses 1 and 2. That is it. Whereas almost the entirety of Luke 21 is talking about 70 AD. So you have 70 AD and the 70th week in both chapters, but they're flipped as far as where the focal points are. So Matthew 24 talks about 70 AD. That's the events of Daniel 9:26. That the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end thereof shall be with a flood. Unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. Yes, from 70 AD to the end, there's going to be multiple desolations of Jerusalem, city and sanctuary. The first of which is 70 AD, when they're actually both destroyed. The second is in the midpoint of the 70th week. The temple's been rebuilt and Jerusalem has been re-inhabited. Obviously, central hub for 70th week activities until the midpoint, when the temple's desolated and they flee from it. And then the headquarters of the 70th week operations moves from Jerusalem to Babylon with the beastie dude. So what you have is it starts in 70 AD with the first of the desolations, and then it moves into the 70th week, where the second of the desolations will be a focal point. Matthew 24 is, with the exception of the first two verses that relate to 70 AD, it is 70th week specific. And we know this because it says in verse 3, he sat upon the Mount of Olives. The disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be? So you're looking for a chronology of events, when and what. So you're looking at a chronology leading to a specific event, the when leading to the what. Well, that kind of gives you an idea of what it's going to be talking about. What's the chronology that leads to a specific event? What, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? Okay. Jesus answered and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you. This is seal 1. Many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. Yes, he said in John 5:22, I am come in my Father's name, ye receive me not. But another shall come in his own name, him ye will receive. Fast forward to Revelation 6:1 and 2, a crown was given unto him, because Israel accepts him. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, shall deceive many. Keep in mind that Daniel used the word many as a reference to Israel, as did Jesus. The word many, in most cases, in the book of Matthew, when used in red letter by Jesus, is a reference to Israel. Shall deceive many. That doesn't mean, like generally stated, a whole lot of people. That means deceive Israel. When he says, many were called, that's the first offering of the kingdom to Israel. They rejected it. But few are chosen. Yeah, it was given to the Gentiles, given to the nation bringing forth the fruits thereof. I would encourage you guys, if you're unsure of my statement, cross-reference Jesus' statements regarding many or few with Daniel's reference to many. They are both talking about Israel. If you didn't know that, now you do. Go look it up. You shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye not be troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Seal 2. There shall be famine. Seal 3. Pestilence. Seal 4. Earthquakes in diverse places. Seal 6. All these are the beginning of sorrows, which is specifically what the end of Revelation 6, after the opening of seals 1 through 6, ends with. The rich men, the poor men, the free men, the bondmen hid themselves in the dens of the mountains and rocks, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come, has started. The beginning of sorrows. Who shall be able to stand? Then after the 70th week commences with the opening of the seals and everyone's terrified, what do people do when they're afraid? They attack what they don't understand. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, shall kill you. That's seal 5 martyrdom. You shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Then shall many, Israel, be offended, shall betray one another, shall hate one another. Micah 7, look it up. I was actually asked about this earlier, so actually I'll read it because it's a good question. Many false prophets shall arise, shall deceive many, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall grow cold. I was asked earlier if that relates to Christians, the love of many growing cold. It's a reference to Israel during the 70th week and the behaviors that the Old Testament prophets say will go on. I actually wrote about this when I was taught in my second book called The Judgment of the Summer Fruit. Comes from Micah 7. The love of many shall grow cold. Woe is me, for I am as when they have gathered the summer fruits. The judgment of the summer fruit. As the grape gleanings of the vintage, there is no cluster to eat. My soul desired the first ripe fruit. The good man is perished out of the earth. There is none upright among men. They all lie in wait for blood. They hunt every man his brother with a net. That's what it says. Because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall grow cold. He that endureth to the end, the same shall be saved. That they may do evil with both hands earnestly. The prince asketh, the judge asketh for a reward. The great man, he uttereth his mischievous desire, so they wrap it up. The best of them is as a briar. The most upright is sharper than a thorn hedge. The day of thy watchman and thy visitation cometh. Now shall be their perplexity. Trust ye not in a friend. Put ye not confidence in a guide. Keep the doors of thy mouth from her that lieth in thy bosom. For the son dishonoreth the father, the daughter riseth up against her mother, the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies are the men of his own house. Micah 7, directly related to how people will be treating one another amidst all the chaos that is going on in the 70th week. Micah 7, 1 through 6 is specifically what Jesus is talking about in those verses in Matthew 24. Specifically verses 12 and 13. So in case that was a question, Micah 7. Then you move into the midpoint of the 70th week. This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then the end shall come. That is your Revelation 14 angel flying through the midst of the heaven, preaching the everlasting gospel. To every, preaching the everlasting gospel that's... And I saw an angel fly through the midst of the heaven, having the everlasting gospel. Why am I drawing a blank on how it goes after that? I've only quoted it about 14 million times. To preach unto them that dwell on the earth, to every nation, kindred, and tongue, and people. So it moves from an Israel-centric to an all the world. This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world as a witness unto all nations. So it moves. That's your movement from the Israel-centric first half into the midpoint where it moves to everybody. Saying with a loud voice, fear God, give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven, the sea, the earth, and the fountains of waters. So that is Matthew 24:14, which then leads into the abomination of desolation. The abomination of desolation is a reactionary event, and it is the second of two desolations determined from Daniel 9:26. Remember, the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, 70 AD. The end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the word, desolations are determined. So now we're at the second one, which is stated to be in the midst of the week. When ye shall therefore see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place. It is a reactionary event to the preaching of the everlasting gospel. The angel says, fear God and worship Jesus who created all things. And the beast goes into the temple, declares himself to be above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. He's like, oh no, don't do what the angel just said, worship me instead. And the instruction to the Jews is when you see that, leave immediately. When you shall therefore see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. What did Daniel describe the abomination of desolation would be? Because in Daniel 9, he said, in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate. So he said, when it's going to happen is in the midst of this outstanding week of years. And he said in Daniel 12, from the cessation of the sacrifice and offering and the abomination that maketh desolate, there shall be 1,203 days. But what does it specifically look like? Well, exactly what Paul wrote about in 2 Timothy 4, 2 Thessalonians 2:4. who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God, because that's what Daniel 11:36 said. The king shall do according to his own will. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. Same thing that Revelation 13:5 picks up on. That he was given a mouth, the beast given a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. He opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. Same thing also that Daniel said in Daniel 7, that there was the little horn given the mouth speaking great words. He came up among the 10, and because of the words, the great words that the horn spake, his body is going to be given to the burning flame. So when you see it, flee. Let him which is on the housetop not come down and take anything out of his house, neither let him which is in the field return back and take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, to them that give suck in those days. Pray you that your flight not be in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day, restricted travel. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no nor shall ever be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, Israel, those days shall be shortened. How so? Because Daniel 12:1. At that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which stands for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And everyone whose name shall be found, everyone shall be delivered, whose names shall be found written in the book. Michael, he is the reason that they flee to safety. The wings of the great eagle from Revelation 12. They take the woman into her place where she's nourished for a time times half a time from the face of the serpent. So except they flee, except their days be shortened by their flight out of Jerusalem, there should no flesh be saved. One of two ways. Either they're deceived into taking, worshiping the beast's image or receiving his mark, and they die spiritually immediately. Or they refuse to do those things and they die physically. There should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, Israel, those days shall be shortened. Then you move into Revelation 13. If any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall rise false Christ. There's your beast, false prophets. There's your second beast, Revelation 13. Who shows the second beast, the false prophet, shows great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they should deceive the very elect. Why will it not be possible? Because the very elect just got taken on the wings of the great eagle into a place which is nourished for a time times half time from the face of the serpent, and also from the beast and false prophet. He says, Behold, I have told you before. Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, Behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. Why? Because he's telling Jesus specifically what his second coming is going to look like. And it's not coming from the desert, and it's not coming from the secret chambers. It's coming as lightning cometh from the east and shineth even unto the west. So also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. And here is where we begin to pick up with what Luke talked about in chapters 12 and 17, leading up to his discourse in chapter 21. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. The rest of this, some of it, very little of it from here forward, will be in Luke 21. The majority of the rest of what is in Matthew 24 from this point, and just about all of what is in Matthew 25, except for the judgment of the sheep and goats, is in Luke 12 and Luke 17, not in Luke 21. So I'm not going to go through any more of Matthew 24. I think we have enough understanding of this passage to understand that the first two verses were 70 AD, related to the destruction of the temple, where there will be not one stone left upon another that will not be thrown down. And that the rest of that is 70th week specific, starting with the seals, moving into the seventh trumpet with the preaching of the everlasting gospel, abomination of desolation, flight of the remnant, mid-trib, and then ultimately with the second coming of Christ, Revelation 19. So I don't think we need to go through any more of that. I think the main question here is that people think that Luke 21 is talking about the same thing. No, And it's actually pretty easy to identify that it's not, based on the sequence of events from the book of Luke. Like I said, the parables of the days of Noah, he also throws in the days of Lot. The good man of the house, if he had known what watch the thief was going to come in, he wouldn't have suffered his house to be broken into. The evil servant who says, my master layeth, and he goes and beats his servants and people, and he does wicked things, then he's going to be judged, not going to get into the kingdom. Luke 12, you had the parable of the 10 virgins, talking about people who wait for the Lord when the bridegroom returns from the wedding to go into the marriage supper to sit down and they will sup with him, basically talking about the marriage supper of the Lamb, Luke 12, 35 through 37. And also the parable of the talents, about those who were entrusted with the master's goods while he was away, and well done, thou good and faithful servant, enter thou into the joy of the Lord. All that stuff was already discussed in Luke 12 and 17, leading up to the events of the triumphal entry, the casting of blindness over Israel, and the prophecy of 70 AD in Luke 19, where it said, again, for the day shall come upon thee that an enemy shall cast a trench about thee, compass thee round, keep thee on every side, shall lay thee even with the ground, and the children within thee. They shall not leave in thee one stone upon another. Why? Because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. So you have good portions of the Olivet Discourse already discussed in Luke, and you have the prophecy of 70 AD specifically given. So then you come to Luke 21, which, like I said, a lot of people confuse with being the same as Matthew 24, and it is not. Why? Because Luke's talking about 70 AD. Like I said, Matthew and Luke kind of flipped their focus. You've got 2 verses in Matthew 24 related to 70 AD, and the rest is 70th week. The inverse of that is you've got only a few verses related to the 70th week in Luke 21, and the majority of it is 70 AD. And together, they provide a big picture of the 2 specific events Israel will need to be told about, otherwise they will be destroyed, because they've been appointed to blindness because they knew not the time of their visitation. Matthew 24 was the grace regarding the 70th week. Luke 21 is the grace that God gives them regarding 70 AD. So Luke 21:1. Actually, it starts in verse 5. And as he spake of the temple, how it was adorned with goodly stones and gifts, he said, as for these things which ye behold, the days will come in the which there shall not be one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. So there's your Matthew 24, 1 and 2, and your Luke 19. And they asked him, Master, but when shall these things be, and what sign will there be when these things shall come to pass? So again, they're asking about a chronology of time. Sounds familiar, right? Well, let's continue on with the familiarity. And he said, take heed that ye be not deceived. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ. And the time draweth near, go ye not therefore after them. When ye shall hear of wars and commotions, that was still 1, here still 2. Be not terrified, for these things first come to pass, but the end is not by and by. Still 2. And he said unto them, nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Great earthquakes shall be in diverse places. Seal 6. Famine. Seal 3. Pestilences. Seal 4. And fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. Obviously talking about Revelation's 70th week. Okay? Well, how are they different then? Because the very next words tell you that he's diverging from the 70th week to talk about something else entirely. But before all these, so now we're talking about something different. They shall lay their hands on you and persecute you. So we are out of talking about the 70th week now, and we are talking about something else that comes before the 70th week. Well, what is the context for the other judgment and desolation that he's already told them about in this book? Luke 19's 70 AD. Before all these, they shall lay their hands on you, persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and in prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. It shall turn to you for a testimony. Settle it therefore in your hearts, not to meditate before what ye shall answer, for I will give you a mouth and wisdom, which all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay nor resist. This actually is something that he talked about just in his ministry, which basically says they're going to deliver you up and take you before kings and rulers. Don't think about what you need to say, for in that same hour, the Holy Spirit will give you your speech. He already talked about that in previous part, unrelated to Olivet Discourse in the book of Matthew, which is why, like I said, it's important to understand that Luke has a tendency to group like thoughts, even if they're not entirely chronological. Just important to note. Verse 16. You shall be betrayed both by parents and brethren and kinsfolk and friends, and some of you shall they cause to be put to death. You shall be hated of all men for my name's sake, but there shall not an hair of your head perish. In your patience possess ye your souls. So basically, have faith. Here is, again, we're talking about similarity to something discussed in Matthew 24, but definitely not the same. We know that this is a divergence if we just look at the language. When ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. This is not talking about the abomination of desolation in Matthew 24. When you shall therefore see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whosoever readeth, let him understand, flee, get out, whatever. Not what that's talking about. Because in Matthew 24, that abomination of desolation had not one thing to do with Jerusalem being compassed about with armies. This desolation that he is talking about in Luke 21 is related to 70 AD. And I will restate this again. The events of which were prophesied as a direct result, a direct judgment in 2 chapters before, Luke 19, for Israel not knowing the timing of the king coming to bring the kingdom. 70 AD was to be a judgment upon the people. And God, Jesus, is being gracious as he is wont to do, and he is telling them what they can do to preserve their lives. When ye shall see Jerusalem compassed about with armies, the Roman armies of Titus or whoever that was, and know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee into the mountains. Maybe they're going to take the same route in the midst of the 70th week. Who knows? It doesn't matter. This in Luke is talking about 70 AD. Then let them which are in Judea flee into the mountains. Let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written might be fulfilled. Yes, days of vengeance. Why? Shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee. They shall not leave in thee one stone upon another. Why? Because thou knewest not the time of their visitation. This is a specific judgment from God upon Israel because they messed the heck up. These be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. Woe unto them that are with child, to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. Yes, which is specifically what he stated in Daniel 9:26. The people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end thereof shall be with a flood of people, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. From the events of 70 AD all the way up until the end, there will be perpetual war, distress, destruction, death surrounding Jerusalem and Israel. And I think we've seen great evidence of that from, well, we weren't alive in 70 AD. Even up to present, we see that. And we know that it will persist until Jesus comes and puts an end to it at the second coming. This is what Daniel 9:26 talks about. Unto the end, desolations are determined. Verse 29 is talking about the diasporas that resulted from 70 AD and after. They shall fall by the edge of the sword, shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Even today, there is war for Jerusalem. There is division for Jerusalem. People are going to be warring for Jerusalem. in the midpoint of the 70th week, after the abomination of desolation, after the flight of the remnant, they're going to cast lots for Jerusalem and divide the land for gain. It does not come at the beginning. It comes at the midpoint after the abomination of desolation. We read about that in Daniel 11. The abomination of desolation is in Daniel 11:36. Daniel 11:39, 3 verses after the abomination of desolation, talks about how they treat Israel after the little beastie dude takes over. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. He shall cause them to rule over many and shall divide the land for gain. So we know, and even in Revelation 11, where we're given insight into Jesus, the mighty angel, gives John a reed and a measuring rod. He stood at the gate. That's Ezekiel. Which is the sister passage to that, but I was going to quote the wrong passage. Please hold. There was given me a reed like unto a rod. The angel stood, saying, Rise, measure the temple of God, the altar, them that worship therein, but the court which is without the temple, or the outer court of the temple, leave out, measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles. The holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months. When do they stop treading Jerusalem underfoot? When Jesus comes back and defeats them at Armageddon, and then Jesus sets up shop for his millennial reign. Jerusalem sits atop the nations, and it says very clearly in the book of Isaiah that strangers shall no more pass through her. So this is a reference from 70 AD, when the city and the sanctuary are destroyed, all the way up till the end. Not only are desolations determined for the land and the people, but that Israel itself, Jerusalem itself, shall be trodden down of the Gentiles. Yes, all the way up until the second coming. Until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And the times of the Gentiles is just about the same as the fullness of the Gentiles, which is discussed in Joel 3. The fullness of the Gentiles is Gentile wickedness filled up the grapes in the winepress. They are filled and then they are trodden. So the times of the Gentiles and the fullness of the Gentiles, whether or not they are exactly the same, they end at the same time when Jesus destroys wicked Gentiles at Armageddon. Now, when Jesus destroys wicked Gentiles at Armageddon at the second coming, there are going to be signs of that. So you're moving from the beginning of a period prophesied to the end of said period prophesied, which is the beginning of the times of the Gentiles, to the end of the times of the Gentiles, the treading of the winepress full of wicked Gentiles, the end of the 70th week, and the destruction of wickedness at the hand of Jesus Christ himself. There shall be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Then shall they see the Son of Man coming in the cloud of heaven with power and great glory. This actually is Isaiah 24. Pretty short chapter. Well, I guess it's not that short. But I'm going to read these verses again because this is specifically what Isaiah 24 is talking about, and it pinpoints it to a very precise time. Luke 21:5. There shall be signs in the sun, the moon, the stars, upon the earth, distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming upon the earth, for the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Isaiah 24. Behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. It shall be as with the people, so with the priest, as the servant, master, maid, mistress, buyer, seller, lender, borrower. The land shall be utterly emptied and utterly spoiled, for the Lord has spoken this word. The earth mourneth and fadeth away. The world languisheth and fadeth away. The haughty people of the earth do languish. The earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. When thus it shall be in the midst of the land among the people, there shall be as the shaking of an olive tree, as the gleaning grapes when the vintage is done. It shall come to pass that he who fleeth from the noise of the fear shall fall into the pit. He that cometh up out of the midst of the pit shall be taken in the snare, for the windows from high are open. The foundations of the earth do shake. The earth is utterly broken down. The earth is clean dissolved. The earth is moved exceedingly. This is why it specifically says, distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, because the earth is moved exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, shall be removed like a cottage. The transgression thereof shall be heavy upon it. It shall fall and not rise again. It shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall punish the host of the high ones that are on high, and the kings of the earth upon the earth. Men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. The powers of the heavens shall be shaken. That is like, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. This is Psalm 82. This is, I have said ye are gods, all of ye are children of the Most High, the angels, but ye shall die like men, fall like one of the princes. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for thou shalt inherit all the nations. There's multiple references here, but the powers of the heavens being shaken are the host on high being judged on earth, which is specifically what it says in Isaiah 24. It shall come to pass in that day the Lord shall punish the host of the high ones that are on high, the kings of the earth upon the earth. They shall be gathered together as prisoners are gathered in the pit. They shall be shut up in the prison, and after many days they shall be visited. Then the moon shall be confounded, the sun ashamed, when the Lord of hosts shall reign in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem before his ancients gloriously. This is Isaiah 24. When it talks about signs in the sun, moon, and stars, distress upon the earth with perplexity, sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, looking after those things which are coming upon the earth, Isaiah 24. It's not just the people on earth that are being punished, it's the host on high being punished. And what do you think the people on earth who have no idea that there are even hosts on high are going to be feeling when they see said host on high coming upon the earth and the destruction of the earth itself? It's like a twofold bad thing. Anyway, Isaiah 24 is what that's talking about. And then obviously the second coming, they shall see the Son of Man coming in the cloud of heaven with power and great glory. When these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. When what things begin to come to pass? 70 AD, folks. 70 AD, when you see Jerusalem compassed about, know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Flee, get out. When you see it come to pass, your redemption, salvation draweth nigh. And for the people who will be on earth at the second coming, because from that point, from the beginning of the times of the Gentiles all the way to the end of the times of the Gentiles, Israel's going to have multiple shots at redemption. The first was salvation from the invading armies in 70 AD. The next is believing on the Lord Jesus Christ during the 70th week before he comes back, seeing the sign of the Son of Man coming in the cloud of heaven with power and great glory. They've got multiple shots at redemption. Even though, saved for the remnant according to the election of grace, the majority of Israel was blinded, has been blinded, will be blinded up till the end. They've got shots. They've got signs. They've got people giving them truth. At some point, they're going to have to choose to believe said truth, or they will die. Luke 21 is talking about the multiple times that Israel will have to not lose their life if they wise up and pay attention. Such is the grace of God. So I'm going to stop there. But I wanted to, because I know that people have asked about this, go through the differences between Matthew 24 and Luke 21. And yeah, there are very big differences. However, taken together, they comprise the last 2 verses of Daniel's 70 weeks vision. Why is that important? Because Israel, when those events occurred, 70 AD, and the 70th week, are a people appointed to blindness. It is specifically stated that the book of Daniel is a sealed book. And unless they have help understanding what it means, they aren't going to know. This is the importance of evangelizing. This is the importance of understanding prophecy. I understand that some people don't really care about prophecy. Totally cool. And I understand also that there are about 14 million viewpoints about what some of these prophecies mean. I will state that for the sake of unbelievers and for the sake of people who are blinded because of their forefathers' mistakes, we have a duty to help them understand the times that they are living in because they cannot do it for themselves. We are useless to help other people if we ourselves do not have it right. This is the importance of understanding Daniel's 70 weeks. No part of the 70th week has been fulfilled yet. If we get that wrong, the severity of what's coming upon them will get lost in translation. This is the importance of prophecy. If people are going to undertake the teaching of prophecy in a public forum and affect potentially the lives of other people, they have such a high duty to get it right. That's the importance of understanding Daniel and why it needs to be understood in context, because there's a whole bunch of people out there that are going to be impacted by it. And you and I, who can understand it, have a duty to help them understand. That is what Jesus was doing in his Olivet discourses, was providing grace by giving information to people who were unable to help themselves. And that is our duty also. Hi, Papa John David. So I hope that was helpful to you guys. If you have any other questions, please let me know. But that, between this video and the last one, hopefully will provide a well-rounded understanding of how they are similar and yet how they are different. Luke 21, Matthew 24, they do have some similarity, but for the most part, they're talking about 2 entirely different things. So, having said that, I will wish you guys a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care. Happy Friday. I will see you later.